Hey, what's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, an Alabama sports podcast from Bama 247. I'm your host, Cody Goodwin. We've got the whole crew here, Mike Rodak and Alex Scarborough. We probably sound a little bit better now that we're behind mics and actual screens. Not that the audio was horrible when we were recording at what is now Scarborough Stadium in Norman, but a little bit better now that we actually have official mics, not nearly as woofy. We got a lot to get to today. We're going to talk a little bit Iron Bowl. We're going to talk a little bit of Alabama still having perhaps an outside shot at the college football playoff despite having 3 losses. But first, guys, we're recording this on Tuesday, November 26th. Thanksgiving is 2 days away. What is your favorite Thanksgiving food?
Mike, you look like you're ready to talk.
Stuffing? I was going to say stuffing, but I feel like I can't say that because I would be termed inaccurate that it's actually called dressing, but I don't want to offend my listeners, but dressing is like what you put on a salad.
When have you ever worried about offending listeners?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that feels like it's a core thing that I like even more than Alabama football is like stuffing is called dressing. Like I can't touch that.
Stuff it in a turkey, it's stuffing. If you don't stuff it in a turkey, it shouldn't be called stuffing.
Right. If it's on the side, I don't know.
So Mike,
bastard stuffing.
I kind of expected hotter takes here when it came to Thanksgiving food because I know it can be a touchy subject.
Stuffing is trash. There's my take.
There we go. Now we're
It's
teeing
like
off.
it's a bread amalgam. Like, what is it? I don't understand. Nothing stands out in the stuffing. It's just like a blob of things.
Yeah, but you need a good role player for the Thanksgiving plate, though, and I think stuffing fills that.
Mashed potatoes fills that for me.
It's always reliable. I can appreciate that.
Now,
My Thanksgiving hot take is turkey sucks.
Because you haven't had smoked turkey.
I've been over this before. I don't even know if
smoked
turkey can save it.
Come back to me.
I prefer, so my mom makes a really good green bean casserole, and my brother-in-law makes really, really good mac and cheese. I'm big on the sides. That's kind of what fills my plate, obviously. I don't eat turkey. I tend to go toward ham because my mom is a saint and she knows that I don't like turkey, so she'll get me ham for Thanksgiving. I know that's weird. Ham is more of a Christmas dish, but that's usually what's on my plate.
Sweet potato casserole is the best side, in my opinion, because it's dessert and it's something you can eat with your dinner.
Not nearly as hot of a start.
I agree with this. Like, what just happened with
Mike? You look like you got some thoughts here.
I feel like it's every Wednesday locker room before Thanksgiving that I ever covered in the NFL. Every TV reporter comes in and is like, "Hey, what's your favorite Thanksgiving food?" And I'm just trying to do actual work covering usually some pretty bad Bills teams, and then you have people asking whether they like stuffing or gravy or mashed potatoes or turnips or whatever, and
that's why we saved this conversation
for me. That's all.
That's why we saved this conversation for the podcast and not for the media availabilities that we have during the week.
Yes, please.
Also, you're going to go down there today, and that's exactly what we'll
be talking about. I refuse. I refuse that.
Mike's favorite side on Thanksgiving is liquor.
I usually don't. No. It's always a busy week for us. I mean, college-wise especially.
I halfway expected hotter takes from you, Mike. You've never been shy about saying how you feel.
I don't have any strong takes about Thanksgiving food. Sorry.
We'll transition into something that you probably, I know for a fact you've got opinions about what we're going to talk about next. Alabama at 8-3 overall, 4-3 in SEC play, officially eliminated in the race to Atlanta for the SEC championship game. However, I know you guys are going to roll your eyes at this because I said it on Saturday night when we were at the Palace on the Prairie, shortly after Alabama lost to Oklahoma. Looking at some of these results, looking at some of the rankings, disclaimer, we are having this discussion before the College Football Playoff Committee reveals their Tuesday night rankings. So it is all possible that this is subject to change. However, I feel fairly confident, kind of soft launched this on Saturday after the game, but I feel fairly confident that there is a world, and we're not very far from it, that Alabama, even with 3 losses, could back into the college football playoff. Now, at 3 losses, they need a little bit of help, but I know I'm not crazy because ESPN says Alabama's got a 37.2% chance of making the playoff. Even CBS has 28% chance that Alabama could back into the playoff. Those are not great odds, but they exist all the same. And when you consider a lot of the chaotic mess that this college football season has been, I'd say over the next 2 weeks that there is something of a path if you want to cling to that hope that Alabama could sneak into the postseason. They'd probably be the 12 or 11 seed, which means they're going on the road. They're going to play a really, really good team in the first round. But the fact remains, there is a possibility that they could back into the dance. Before we maybe break down what that path looks like, Mike, I know you pretty well shut me down the moment I brought this up in the press box. Alex, I think you're leaning closer to Rodak than you are to me, but what do we think about the possibility of Alabama potentially still backing in, whether or not they deserve it, to the college football playoff at 9-3?
The first thing that you mentioned was very important in that this is before the playoff rankings come out. And as someone who has carefully watched some of these playoff probabilities on ESPN's website for not just this year, but previous years, they change after Tuesday's rankings because that's a tranche of data that comes in, if you will. And the polls this week both polls have Clemson ahead of Alabama, which is important. And assuming the playoff rankings have the same, and in fact, there's been times when the playoff rankings have actually trended lower than the polls. 2 weeks ago, that was the case. Then that more than likely will cause an update to ESPN's metrics by Wednesday that will actually lower Alabama's playoff chances. And it's a situation where there's only 1 week of games left. The big problem for Alabama is that Clemson plays South Carolina. The problem for Alabama is that you would have a better argument to get in over an SEC championship game loser if you had 2 losses and you just didn't make the game, like Penn State's doing in the Big Ten or what Tennessee's going to do. You don't have an argument to get in over the SEC championship game loser when you screwed up your chance to be in the game by losing 24-3 at Oklahoma. So Georgia potentially going to Atlanta and losing does not matter. Georgia would be in either way. Texas beating Texas A&M, going and losing to Georgia does not matter. Texas would be in over you either way. The ACC will settle itself between SMU, Miami, and Clemson. You have 3 teams. Even if there is a loss between Miami and SMU on Saturday, SMU hosts Cal, Miami goes to Syracuse, Clemson would be in into the ACC championship game. So you're just setting yourself up for – look, I think the odds of both ACC teams in the championship game making it are very high right now. You're not going to punish the loser of that game in favor of an Alabama team that's sitting at home. And the bottom line here is that they looked like crap against Oklahoma. It was not a close loss on the road. They were thoroughly beaten. Their quarterback play was awful. And that was an Oklahoma team that has a lot of issues. They fired their offensive coordinator. They haven't won an FBS game since September. They had one SEC win. That is very, very damaging on your resume. And you have a situation where if Clemson beats South Carolina, and even if they missed the ACC championship game, they have a better resume than you. I think they're in. I think they're ranked ahead. Not in, but they're in over you in terms of the pecking order. They're ranked ahead of you, I think, this week. We'll find out tonight. And then, South Carolina will be an interesting case because if they beat Clemson, you're looking at 2 3-loss teams. South Carolina's resume, even with a close loss on the road to Alabama, is pretty good because they have the 12th ranked strength of schedule right now. Alabama has the 11th. However, adding in the Clemson game is probably going to flip that because South Carolina's remaining strength of schedule is 18th. Alabama's is 46th. I would assume those would flip. South Carolina would actually have a stronger strength of schedule than Alabama. with a pretty. I mean, they would have a good win over Clemson and a win over Texas A&M, and their losses would be better. The loss at home to Ole Miss was their low point, but a close loss to LSU, a close loss on the road to Alabama, whereas Alabama has the bad Vandy loss and the bad South Carolina loss. I don't want to say that it's guaranteed that South Carolina will be ahead of the pecking order of Alabama, but I think they would have certainly an argument. But I just don't know if any of the teams that are currently in the field losing, with the exception of maybe Indiana, I mean, that would be a monumental upset for Purdue to pull off a road win. This Purdue team is terrible, terrible, terrible over Indiana.
Would a lopsided loss, Notre Dame losing to USC, do anything for you?
I think Notre Dame, a 2-loss Notre Dame team that has wins over A&M, a ranked Army team, a ranked Navy team at the time that doesn't look quite as good, a ranked Louisville team, I think they would still be in over Alabama. Because look, I mean, right now, what were they in the rankings, in the CFP rankings last week? 5 or 6? There were 6. Let me double check.
Six.
Yeah, there were 6 last week. So you're talking about going on the road to USC and Notre Dame falling 8 spots from 6 to 8 spots from 6 to 13, basically. I don't think that would happen. I don't think their fall would be that steep.
Alex, what do you have to add to the thought that, again, they need quite a bit of help here, but the idea that Alabama could still, I'm saying with 2 weeks left to play, because there's still week 14 coming up, and then there's the litany of conference championship games coming up.
I don't think the conference championship games matter for that.
I think it does. I think it does when you consider the ACC, because that's where I think Alabama needs the most help. The ACC needs to be a one bid league.
Would be in over you. The ACC loser would be in over you.
I disagree with that.
What if they both lose on Saturday, and then one of them gets
that can't happen, because then you'd have another team go into the ACC championship game unless all 3 lost.
That's where I think when you look at how can Alabama back in, I think it's the ACC going to have to combust a little bit, whether it's Miami losing at Syracuse, which I think is entirely possible. They're playing that game at the Carrier Dome, and then turning around and beating SMU in the ACC championship game. That would mean both of them have 2 losses, and then you're comparing a 2-loss SMU to a 3-loss Alabama, and you're comparing those resumes, and that's where I think they potentially pick Alabama.
If Miami loses to Syracuse, Clemson makes the ACC championship. I'm reading that right now. Clemson would advance the ACC championship because the Tigers' conference record will be better.
But what if Clemson loses to South Carolina and still makes the ACC championship, and then loses? Because the South Carolina game doesn't affect their conference standings.
Then I think South Carolina's in over Alabama with a win.
I don't think they can do that, because Alabama's got the head-to-head.
I absolutely think they will.
Yes.
Yeah. Recency bias is real, and not just that. Was there another big game for that committee to be looking at on Saturday night, other than just stewing in how bad Alabama looked? There wasn't a lot to distract them.
No, that's fair.
I think if you're putting odds on Alabama making the playoff, I think it's not 0, but I don't think it's double digits. I think a lot has to happen, and I'm not even sure what the total machinations of it are for it to actually take place.
Right.
But I think it starts with South Carolina losing.
See, I would have figured that starts with South Carolina beating Clemson. So
it doesn't eliminate Clemson, though, because Miami losing to Syracuse automatically puts Clemson in the ACC championship game.
Right, but then if Clemson wins the ACC as a 3-loss team, I would think the ACC is a 1-bid league, and that's where it opens up the potential for
SMU. Then SMU.
That's where you and I are going to disagree. I don't think so. I think the ACC, to get 2 teams in, it's probably stronger, honestly, if SMU Miami both win this weekend and then SMU beats Miami.
You know what SMU didn't do? They didn't lose to Vandy and Oklahoma. They didn't lose to Oklahoma by 21 points. We're
in full agreement that Alabama does not deserve to be in the 12-team playoff. I think all 3 of us can agree on that. I'm just saying there's a world where they can back in. And I think it's a little bit more real than people realize. Especially if things fall the way they do. I don't know if they will fall the way they do, but I think it's a possibility.
Yeah. I think there's like 7 ifs in that scenario. and not the least important of which is actually beating Auburn. And it's the same. If I'm going to sit here and say that Oklahoma had the recipe, there's nothing to say that Auburn can't turn around and recreate it, because they have the pieces there. They do.
Perhaps we'll circle back to this when we have our midweek show, I suppose, next week during Conference Championship week. It's also National Signing Day that week, so maybe that's not the midweek show, that's the late week show. But I think the possibility is there. Obviously, this conversation changes after we see what the playoff rankings look like and also what happens this coming weekend. But I don't know. There's a gut feeling that there's, especially the other thing I keep thinking about too, Alex, is you have said pretty consistently throughout the season that the SEC has a proverbial gun to the committee's head about getting 4 teams in. And if Alabama's just sitting there as that 4th team and you're doing the whole blind resume thing, I don't know. I don't know that people are going to be happy about it. I don't even know that we would be particularly happy about it, but
well, they don't care what for.
Right. They would get their $4 million from South Carolina, just like they would get their $4 million from Alabama making it.
Now, you could get conspiracy theorists and say that the CFP is a television show and which one is going to draw more audience. Definitely Alabama. But I think at the end of the day, if it's South Carolina beats Clemson, the way they've been playing of late, I think you give them the nod over Alabama, especially given the fact that they were in a position to beat Alabama in Bryant-Denny Stadium if they don't just turn the ball over late.
I would very much question at this point how much credit the committee is going to give Alabama for the 28 points it scored early in the Georgia game. That was 2 months ago, Thursday. I just don't think the committee is going to heavily weigh that anymore.
But the committee is totally unpredictable. And when we talk about
that's the other wild part of this thing, is that you never know week to week what they're going to say, what it's going to mean compared to what they've said previously. We don't know what they're looking for. In previous years, it was always who you beat, right? And this year there's an element of that, but also you look at the way they've done their rankings these first few weeks, and it's okay, start with the undefeateds, then the 1 losses, then the 2 losses, then 3 losses. And is that going to hold all the way through? I think people would probably appreciate that level of consistency. That way they'd know what to expect, but that's probably not fair, right? Because we just, everything could change over these next couple weeks.
Yeah. I don't trust them to continue to do, not let alone do the right thing. Just keep doing the same thing they've been doing. There's no linear line they bring to it.
Right. And what if A&M beats Texas at home? Because that would be bad for Alabama.
Yeah, they're toast. Alabama's done at that point.
Right. Then A&M and Texas are both ahead of you in the pecking order. That's the one domino. I agree. That one domino falls and you're 6 feet under.
Well,
I agree with that.
From losing to Auburn. I'm just going to keep saying it's a possibility.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Well, I mean, after the way you were talking about the Oklahoma game, I hear you, right? Because you look at the way they lost Oklahoma, you look at the way they lost to Vanderbilt, right? Those 2 games were almost exact. Maybe this is our transition to discuss the Iron Bowl a little bit. Auburn's set up to do exactly that, right? That the offense that Kane Womack refers to as 1+, where the quarterback is operating as a runner. Peyton Thorne has been doing that. They did that last year with Peyton Thorne, Jarquez Hunter. I would argue that Hunter is playing at a much higher level this year than maybe he was in certain parts last year. They use that motion-based scheme, which really messes with Alabama's defenders' eyes. And I know the games at Bryant-Denny Stadium where Auburn doesn't, they not only don't win there, but the games aren't really always super competitive, at least recently. But I think that's something to consider when thinking about this matchup. Before we dive a little bit more into the matchup, I did want to get out here on the show. It is Iron Bowl week. Auburn players met with the media on Monday. We're recording this on Tuesday. And let me tell you, man, these Tiger players are feeling themselves. I make rivalries fun again. I love this. Couple of quotes from the media availability. DeMarcus Riddick, freshman linebacker, did not mince words on Monday. He said, quote, "I will not lose to Bama while I'm here." He also said on Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe, "He is a good quarterback. He's fast. He's not faster than me. He will not get out of that box this week." On Ryan Williams, who we all believe is the sun, the moon, and the stars for Alabama's offense, maybe not of recently, but over the course of the season, he's been spectacular. Riddick said, "He's electric and this and that, but in my eyes, he ain't really nobody to me." He ain't no big-time player to me. Okay. Harry Thompson, a one-time Alabama receiver commit who flipped and is now at Auburn, tweeted side-by-side stats of Jalen Milroe and Peyton Thorne. They're pretty similar. Believe Milroe has a few more passing yards, but Peyton Thorne has 5 more touchdown passes this season. Mike, I think you wrote a story yesterday, former Alabama quarterback, kind of comparing those two guys and their stats coming into this game. Auburn's not holding back, man. And this is also a team that, while they have struggled throughout the course of the year, playing with a lot of confidence. I think that confidence is more or less what came through during their media availability on Monday. What do we think about Iron Bull shit talk?
I don't know. Like, I don't think it's automatically whenever you see like something like this, it's like, oh, they're going to make them pay. Like, they're going to eat their words. And I just don't know if that's going to be true in this game. Like, I could see Auburn backing it up. Like, this Alabama team is going to need to show something. I don't know if this is, is this coordinated on Auburn's part to try to not stir Alabama, but like, we've seen them be emotional, like the Kendrick Law thing, the Malachi Moore thing. Like, there's been times when this Alabama team has, been too concerned about things like that, external factors, whatever you want to call it, like trash talking. We heard Tim Smith talk about it before the Tennessee game. Like, we can't be concerned about that stuff. Is this almost strategic on Auburn's part to try to get under Alabama's skin? I don't know. Or is it just Auburn being confident? And are they going to be a confident team that comes in playing a team that has seemingly lost confidence, given the way they've played at Oklahoma? And does that confidence win the day for Auburn? Or is it overconfidence from Auburn? They come in, Alabama uses it as motivation, and they pull out a win when, their season's, based on the results of our previous conversation, almost certainly over in terms of the playoff. Like, I don't know which one it's going to be. I think any of those paths, any of those theories are possible. I just don't know if, like, again, you kind of automatically see this in like Alabama history. Anaya Smith with the A&M stuff last year going into the Alabama game, and these players tend to eat their words. I just don't know if that's going to be true in this particular game.
Well, and that's why I was kind of curious what you guys were thinking about this, because I think a lot of people think along those lines, like, oh, players are telling us how they really feel, right? Which is something we kind of always want as sports writers. Like, we want these guys to be a little bit more honest and say fun things like that, right? Especially when it's a rivalry week, right? Like, make rivalries fun again. Like, that to me is a lot of fun. Stir it up. Let's have a good time. We're talking about a game here, right? It's supposed to be fun. Auburn players, especially DeMarcus Riddick, coming out and saying things like that makes this thing a little bit more fun. It adds juice to a rivalry that probably doesn't need any more, but hell yeah, let's go. But I'll also, Mike, like, I agree with you. Like, this to me shows, I think it's important to note here that DeMarcus Riddick is only a freshman, and he's played fairly well this year. Auburn's defense, I believe, has taken steps forward over the course of the season, and they're playing better. And so, like, this kind of shows me, like, a lot is made, and we crack jokes here and there about, Auburn's winning the in-state recruiting battle. But, like, when you bring in guys like this that have this type of mindset and the way that they're playing, like, they blew a big lead against A&M, but ultimately won it in 4 overtimes. Like, they're probably feeling themselves a little bit, and they probably deserve the right to, just with what they've been able to do in recent weeks. And yeah, like, this did not come across to me as like normal rivalry trash talk. This also, there's that element of these guys are playing well, and they probably, like the rest of us, saw highlights from the Alabama-Oklahoma game. And like, yeah, like, they probably think they can come in and beat a team that looked like that in Norman. I don't know. Alex, what do you have to add to this?
I think it's surprising that Auburn feels this great about themselves by beating ULM and needing 4 overtimes at home to beat Texas A&M. I didn't know that was the AFC East. I mean, I'm shocked.
The AFC sucks.
I mean, still. I mean, are they 500? No. Oh crap! They're not. They're not even 500. I mean, talk your shit. I mean, I guess. But like, what do you have to feel that confident about? Like, I like that when players speak their mind, but you also have to listen to what they say. Marcus Riddick talking about he's never lost a rivalry game. You are a true freshman. Your rivalry games were Chilton County, bro. Like,
not Chilton County rival.
And also to fact check, when you Google Auburn's rivals, Alabama, Georgia, I'm pretty sure they lost to Georgia this year. So you're 0-1.
Yeah, and it's just, is it manufactured or is it real? I think that's the more interesting question. But the fact that it's a true freshman saying it, not a veteran player, makes me think it's really how they feel. I'm just curious what the impact is on Alabama, because it's one thing to get angry, it's another thing to play into it. If they're daring you to run the football, or they're daring you, if you're Ryan Williams, to play outside of yourself, that's a problem. You don't need to be doing that. Again, I didn't know Auburn could be confident when they're one game under 500, but by God, they're doing it.
Chilton County's rival is Jemison, not Mae Jemison of John Petty fame, I believe, but Jemison, Alabama High School, which is in Chilton County, in case you're wondering.
We probably don't have enough time to fully fact check whether or not he loses to rivals, but I don't know. I kind of like the juice. I think it's a lot of fun. I also think that there are elements of this game that, again, while it's at Bryant-Denny and Auburn has not, I don't believe they've won in Tuscaloosa since 2010. And you look at some of the results from the most recent matchups in Tuscaloosa. 2022 was 49-27 Alabama. 2020, 42-13 Alabama. 2018, 52-21 Alabama. 2016, 30-12 Alabama. 2014 was a shootout, 55-44 Alabama. And then 2012, 49-0 Alabama. Like, the Tide owned them at Bryant-Denny. They owned them in Tuscaloosa. That said, like, I'm of the belief, I guess, that, and maybe this is where we talk about the game a little bit. I know that Auburn loves to run the ball. They use something of an option offense. They've also, they're pretty explosive as well. They also have a freshman receiver, Cam Coleman, who has been pretty good. He has taken some steps forward over the last few weeks in a way that Ryan Williams maybe hasn't. Like, I think defenses maybe figured him out a little bit, at least, how to limit his overall productivity. Part of that could also be the offensive play calling. We could have that discussion if we would like to, but there's an Auburn offense that, like, Hugh Freeze knows how to play Alabama. Like, he's not scared of it. And now this is a different Alabama staff. So I don't know. There are some elements here that I think this game could potentially get interesting. I think being at home matters here. What else do we think about this game, this matchup specifically? Mike, I'll let you go.
Literally, you'll let me go because I do need to go go ask players about this game. So I'll let you ask Alex about it because I need to leave. See you.
So Alex, this game, like, I think being in Tuscaloosa matters, but I also think, like, when it comes to the on the field stuff, this is interesting, right? Like, there are some elements here that I think Auburn could exploit Alabama a little bit, just based on the way that Vanderbilt and more recently Oklahoma did, right? Just with mobile quarterbacks, using that motion-based offense, the fact that Alabama, even in a different defense, continues to struggle with motion and dealing with an option offense. Like, what is it about this matchup you think is the most intriguing?
Well, and unlike Oklahoma and unlike Vanderbilt, and really unlike Tennessee from what we've seen, Auburn's got a damn good receiver in Cam Coleman. So if Peyton Thorne just wants to throw the ball up and see what happens, they can do that too. But I think it's interesting. We've been recording for 30 minutes and 23 seconds. We haven't talked about Deontay Lawson. And the fact of him being out of this game in a game in which the quarterback is probably going to try to be mobile, what Justin Jefferson does coming in his stead, what that means in terms of personnel packages, because that personnel package of Campbell, Jefferson, and Lawson was pretty productive. What is the trickle-down effect of what they're able to do or not able to do with Jahad Campbell because you don't have Lawson in the middle and you're relying more on Justin Jefferson to play more of a traditional micro linebacker role? Do you try to trust Justin Okoronkwo, a freshman in a rivalry game where he hadn't logged meaningful reps yet this season? That's a dangerous proposition. So this is again, we can talk about all the outside stuff with it. The matchups of this game, again, are an issue. The thing is, though, and it's the same issue, same thing I thought Alabama might be able to exploit with Oklahoma. Auburn's offensive line is not very good. Can you win up front? They weren't able to do it against Oklahoma, but can you do it at home? Can you get to the quarterback? Peyton Thorne can run. He's not as athletic as Jackson Arnold is. But if you can get him on the ground, if you can get in his space, he's shown that he will give you the football. that's going to be huge early in this game. I think momentum swings are going to play a huge role in this one because of everything that goes into it. And because of what happened a week ago, Alabama desperately needs to start this game out fast. Because if Auburn does, at home, Bryant Denny is either going to be quiet or all we're going to hear is boos and things might get sideways.
Yeah. And that's where I think like just being at home matters, not just because of the history, but like you can just tell that this Alabama team plays a little bit differently when they're at home. Like I know the South Carolina game almost got all the way away from them, but generally speaking, like they play a little bit more confident. They play a little bit faster, both sides of the ball. I think that's going to matter because, like you said, they're probably going to need that fast start. The fast start that we wanted to see against Oklahoma did not see at all. I know they moved the ball a little bit and turned it over but they really only managed a field goal. This is another game where you'd like to see a fast start. You'd like to basically punch Auburn in the mouth early and make them go down. And you'd like the defense to get back on its horse a little bit. And I'm interested on a number of different levels because there's the whole run game thing, right? Like Peyton Thorne able to run the ball a little bit. How much of Vanderbilt's playbook, how much of Oklahoma's playbook are they going to utilize this week? There's also the Jarquez Hunter of the thing. He has been running really, really well lately. You look at yards per game average. He's one of only two SEC running backs, Jarquez Hunter, to average more than 100 yards per game, along with Tennessee running back Dylan Sampson. And we saw what happened when Alabama went to Knoxville to play Tennessee. Again, I think playing at home matters, but that's just another element that Alabama is going to have to take into account. And when you factor in the Deontay Lawson of the thing, it's what really worries me, I think, the most about them losing Deontay Lawson for the season. They lose a lot of flexibility, right? Because when you had Lawson, you could do the Lawson, Jefferson, and Jahad Campbell all on the field at the same time, and you could have Campbell play the wolf position. You could have him as a pass rusher. You could have him setting the edge, that type of thing. You kind of have to keep Campbell in the middle now, and which is, unless you want to play Okoronkwo, unless you want to play Caden Jones, I'm not sure that this is the game that you probably want to experiment with that a little bit. But by keeping Jahad in the middle, he's the queen on the chessboard, but you kind of limit what all Kane can do with him when you need him in the middle to play the run a little bit more. So then, okay, you're relying on, because Jahad has been very, very good rushing the passer when he's in those situations. When you can't put him in those situations, you're relying on Quay Russaw, you're relying on LT Overton, you're relying on the defensive line. They have not been reliable pass rushers, at least consistently. Maybe they will be at home on Saturday, but just more data points than not suggest that could also factor into this game in terms of can you get in Peyton Thorne's face? Because like you said, when they do, Peyton Thorne will turn the ball over. When they don't, they're second in the country nationally in passing plays of 40-plus yards with 17. And you had already mentioned Cam Coleman. He's really, really good. They have Keandre Lambert-Smith, I believe he's a Penn State transfer. He's also pretty good receiver this year. Like, they've got some weapons on the outside if you can't disrupt Peyton Thorne. And just the whole, how everything kind of connects to one another, how the lack of, with Lawson not there, you can't really rush the passer with Campbell. And when you can't do that, it kind of opens up a little bit more for Thorne. Like that, to me, this could be really interesting if they can't figure out how to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, I'm curious if we see a little bit more Yanze Pierre. I was surprised we did not see him very much against Oklahoma for a guy who we thought was trending in an upward direction. I think the best way to limit Auburn's run game in this instance is to have a lead and to take that a little bit off the table. But I think Hugh Freeze is probably going to be pretty stubborn about it and just run the football as he should. Again, it's just the matchups on this one. And if you've got Malachi Moore making 5 tackles in the first quarter, might be a long day. You need those guys up front to clean things up and really limit the run game and force. As good as Auburn's receivers can be, I think you can live with Auburn putting the football in the air and see what happens there. You don't want to get beat by Jarquez Hunter and Peyton Thorne on the ground. You've seen too much of that this season already.
If you're relying on Zabian Brown to cover Cam Coleman or Damani Jackson to cover Cam Coleman or Keandre Lambert-Smith, how good do you feel about that? If that's what the matchup comes down to, if Alabama can't get to Peyton Thorne and they're relying more or less on the secondary, do you feel good about that matchup? I feel like it might be a toss-up.
Yeah, I'd rather have that matchup than the alternative. I think, all in all, I think the secondary's played pretty well this year. Now, they benefited from subpar quarterbacks along the way. I mean, they can't do anything about that. But I think Damani's played solid throughout the season. I think Zabian's had his moments. And again, I'd rather live with Auburn chucking the ball 35 yards down the field than walking the ball down the field 6 yards a carry, which is what we've kind of come to see too many times this year. You need somebody to be disruptive. And also, this is a thing outside of Alabama's control. I think the crowd needs to play a role in this game. You get some unforced errors on Auburn's part. You get them in first and second and long. You really mess with what Hugh Freeze and the offense wants to do. Those procedural type penalties, Bryant-Denny Stadium can play a role in making that happen.
On the flip side, when Alabama's got the ball, Jalen Milroe's a little bit of a different quarterback at home.
Mm-hmm.
But I give Auburn credit last year that they really kind of made Milroe a little bit of a I don't want to say non-factor because he was able to run the ball a little bit in the second half last week. But like we've seen that Alabama's offensive brain trust maybe a little bit stubborn when it comes to certain adjustments. Now, nobody played well against Oklahoma. I'd like to think that they're going to be back at home. It's a rivalry game. They're going to play a lot better. But what do you think is the path to maybe moving the ball? Because Auburn's defense, middle of the pack in the SEC in virtually everything, but it seems to be a defense that's on the rise. They're playing a little bit faster. They're able to get after the quarterback a little bit. Like, is this, and clearly the blueprint that Oklahoma showed is if you take away Milroe's legs, this offense sputters very hard. Like, what do you think the next button should be in terms of, okay, if they take Milroe away, what's next?
Deep shot to 2, deep shot to 5. I mean, I'm honest, in the first 3 plays, I'm taking a shot deep. I don't care if it works. You have to get the safeties on their heels. You can't have them playing in the box and limiting what Jalen Milroe does. They have to throw to open up the run. I don't think they've shown over and over again, as good as Milroe is, that they can't force the run. They need an alternative to that to get the defense on its heels. So can you do that? Can you feature Justice Haynes and Jam Miller and maybe send them a message that they have a role in this offense next year? I think that would probably help as well. But create an alternative to Milroe. It's hard to make those adjustments late in the season. That's why I don't think Ty Simpson needs to play in this game unless it gets away from Alabama. Either they build a huge lead or Jalen throws 2 picks. But I think in a way you're stuck with what you are. But can you get the explosive passing game back? Because I think that changes a lot of what Durkin and that defense is going to want to do.
I'd like to see them take some deep shots. The deep passing game has not been there in recent weeks for Alabama. I know that Ryan Williams touchdown that called back that probably shouldn't have been called back. Whatever.
There's no probably. It was a blown call. I've talked to enough
it was.
So I feel confident. There's no justification for it.
Yeah, not great. Wiped away another sensational catch by a freshman who has had a season full of sensational catches
and multiple drops. Ryan had a drop. Jeremy lost a ball in the lights. I
think there were 4 or 5 total drops by Alabama in that game against Oklahoma, which is the most they've had in a single game this season. Like when I say everybody played bad, I mean the quarterback, I mean the receivers, I mean the offensive line, like just nobody played well.
Yep.
How they come out and respond, I think, is going to be really intriguing to see. I like the idea of I don't want to say trying to force the downfield passing game, but like taking some shots to, at the very least, kind of loosen up Auburn's defense. Like you said, whether or not it works, like if you're an Alabama fan, obviously you want that to work because if you take some quick deep strikes down the field early, that could be potentially your path to an early lead. And if you're able to take an early lead, maybe you can get Auburn out of running the ball a lot and forcing Peyton Thorne to drop back and pass a little bit. And
if you're going to run Milroe, limit the RPO game. I don't think he's quite that good at it. And tell him, I want you running between the hashes at all times. Stop trying to get wide all the time. You're big enough to run through tackles, get north and south, get a full head of steam, and just go. I mean, if that's how you're going to run the football, run it that way. This sprinting out to the edge is not working.
I can't tell you how many times when I was rewatching the Alabama-Oklahoma game where I was just muttering to myself, get north and south, get north and south. Like I even wrote it in the rewatch. Like there were a lot of times where he would follow his blocker, and if he just fell forward like a yard or 2, like it would end up positive, right? So then you're looking at 3rd and short, or you're looking at 2nd and manageable or something like that. But there were at least 3 times where he bounced to the outside and what should have probably been a 3-4 yard game turned into a 1 yard gain or a 1 yard loss, or there was one time where it was even a 4 or 5 yard loss. Like, just, dude, like, you're 6'3", 220, like, just fall forward. You're going to gain yards. And especially in a game like this where there's a lot of juice and, like you said, there's a lot of momentum, a tackle for loss could kill a drive. And when you need a big lead to take Auburn out of what they want to do, you cannot have drives killed early.
Yep.
Those are kind of our early thoughts on the Iron Bowl. We will be back. Well, I will be back on Thursday. We're going to link up with Nathan King from Auburn Earn to cover our Auburn 24/7 sports site to talk a little bit more about the Iron Bowl, get the lowdown on the Tigers this year, who struggled early but seem to be coming on strong, as evidenced by the shit talking that they had earlier this week. Excited for that conversation with Nathan. And then we'll be back on Sunday to discuss whatever happens in this Iron Bowl. Still kind of working out what our schedule is going to look like next week, since Alabama is now not going to Atlanta, but we still got some signing day stuff. So we're going to link up with Brett and see what shows we can bring up there. So yeah, that's kind of the rough plan for now moving forward. In the meantime, be sure to rate and review this show wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 247 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 247 and 24/7 Sports, where you can get all of your coverage of the Crimson Tide. Not totally dead yet when it comes to the postseason. Maybe hanging on by a little bit of a thread. We'll see what happens Tuesday night when the playoff rankings come out, and obviously what happens over the next couple weeks with the regular season finale and the conference championship games. Maybe they'll back in. Maybe they will head to Florida for the Gator Bowl or the Citrus Bowl. I don't know. We'll all find out soon enough. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening. We will talk to you all again soon.